Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is Monday, March 23, 2026.
We are standing at a geopolitical point of no return. A 48-hour ultimatum is ticking down to zero, missiles have pierced the supposedly impenetrable skies of the Negev desert, and the global economy is teetering on the edge of a chasm. Today's deep dive isn't just about a conflict, it's about a game changer that is rewriting the world order as we speak.
Yeah, and look, if you are listening to this right now, maybe you're sitting in traffic, watching the price on the gas station sign just tick upward.
Or just feeling that anxiety.
Right, that low-level hum of anxiety that just seems to be vibrating underneath everything lately.
Right.
We are going to break down exactly why the ground is shifting beneath your feet. Our mission today is to dissect the unprecedented military strikes unfolding across the Middle East, track the severe economic shockwaves that are currently hammering global markets, and frankly, your own wallet. And we're going to pull back the curtain on the completely automated algorithmic targeting systems that are quietly driving this escalation and analyze the shocking domestic political earthquakes fundamentally shaking Washington, D.C.
But before we delve into the mechanics of this crisis, we really need to issue a very clear disclaimer to you, the listener.
Yes, very important.
Today's broadcast covers highly charged, rapidly evolving political events, including, specific statements, policy decisions, and actions from both left-wing and right-wing political figures. We want to state unequivocally that neither of us endorses any of the political viewpoints, candidates, or ideologies discussed here today.
Right.
Our sole purpose is strictly to impartially analyze the facts, trace the causal links, and synthesize the original reporting to help you understand the hidden truths beneath the headlines. I mean, we are here to look at the data, the geography, and the technology. We are not here to pick a side.
Right, because honestly, the data itself is terrifying enough without adding spin to it. I mean, the clock is quite literally ticking. And the linchpin of this entire global anxiety attack is a 48-hour ultimatum.
The countdown.
Exactly. President Trump has drawn a very explicit, very public line in the sand regarding the Strait of Hormuz, which, just for context for the listener, is the narrow waterway through which roughly a fifth of the world's daily oil consumption passes.
A massive choke point.
Right, and the demand out of Washington is completely binary. Open the strait without threat, or the United States military will systematically hit and obliterate Iranian energy and power plants, starting with the largest, most critical civilian and industrial facilities first.
And we have the exact expiration time for this ultimatum, right? Based on the original declaration.
We do. It is set for exactly 7:44 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, today, Monday.
See, that specific timestamp, 7:44 p.m., is it's a critical piece of modern statecraft to understand. When a world leader publicly announces a hyper-specific countdown to a global audience like that, they are intentionally eliminating their own diplomatic off-ramps.
Yeah, you can't walk that back.
Exactly. You are locking the military apparatus into a binary outcome. It's either the adversary completely capitulates and loses face on the global stage, or you initiate what could rapidly become the most devastating aerial bombing campaign of the 21st century. It's a massive geopolitical gamble. It just assumes the sheer weight of the threat will break the opponent's psychological resolve before that clock hits zero.
But the adversary hasn't capitulated at all. If anything, I mean, they've accelerated.
Oh, absolutely.
We are seeing devastating retaliation that challenges the fundamental assumptions of modern military defense, like Iranian heavy conventional ballistic missiles completely bypassed the air defense system and struck deep into the Negev desert. And we need to pause here, right, and explain the gravity of this. Because the Arrow system isn't just some, standard anti-air battery.
No, it's top tier.
Right. This is a multi-billion-dollar exo-atmospheric interceptor network, jointly funded and developed over decades by the U.S. and Israel. It is designed specifically to calculate the trajectory of hypersonic ballistic missiles in space and destroy them before they even re-enter the atmosphere. And yet, it failed.
It failed catastrophically in its primary directive. The psychological shattering of the Israeli public here, I mean, it cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
The layered defense architecture was engineered for this precise scenario, right? Stopping heavy conventional warheads from detonating in populated areas. But let's look at the hard data on the ground here.
Right, what actually happened?
A residential building in the city of Arad took a direct hit. And Arad is not a bustling military hub. It is a quiet, relatively isolated desert city near the Dead Sea. Population of about 26,000 people. We are looking at 88 people wounded in a single strike, with 10 in serious condition. And to put a human face on this systemic failure, there is a 5-year-old girl and a 12-year-old child currently fighting for their lives in the operating rooms at Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba.
Wait, hold on, though. Let me challenge the premise of a total systemic failure for a second.
Okay.
If Israel is facing a prolonged, potentially multi-month barrage, doesn't it make cold mathematical sense to let some ordnance fall if the radar projects it hitting a less dense area? I mean, we know interceptors cost millions of dollars apiece. Are we absolutely certain this wasn't a tragic but, calculated conservation strategy by the defense forces?
Look, you do not conserve an interceptor when the incoming trajectory maps directly to an apartment block in a city of 26,000 people. I have to push back hard on the conservation theory.
But mathematically,
that logic only applies to scattered, unguided submunitions or rockets falling in empty sand dunes. This was a targeted, single, heavy payload arcing in toward a residential structure. The system attempted to track it, and it simply failed to stop it. If a mid-sized desert city can absorb a direct hit from a ballistic missile while the multi-billion-dollar shield is supposedly active, the illusion of total defense is dead.
wow. And it wasn't just Iran that shattered that illusion either. We saw a simultaneous strike on Dimona.
Yes.
And Dimona is arguably the most highly protected city in the entire region because it houses the nuclear research center. That strike resulted in at least 20 injuries, including a 10-year-old boy and a 40-year-old woman.
Striking Dimona is the ultimate signaling tactic. It demonstrates that the most sensitive, heavily guarded installations, the crown jewels of the nation's strategic deterrence, are well within the mathematical reach of conventional ballistic forces.
So nowhere is safe.
Exactly. And this leads us to the broader strategic miscalculation happening in Washington regarding that 7:44 p.m. ultimatum. According to the analysis by Daniel Davis, you have to look at the sheer demographics and the physical geography of the adversary. We were talking about Iran, right? A nation of 93 million people.
That's huge.
It is, featuring a massive mountainous terrain with a military infrastructure that is intentionally decentralized across 31 separate military districts.
So it's not like you could just bomb a central command node and the whole country just, shuts down.
Precisely. Davis points out a harsh historical reality that military planners often just willfully ignore. You cannot bomb a heavily entrenched, decentralized population of that size into unconditional submission. Whether you look at the Rolling Thunder campaign in Vietnam or the systematic firebombing of Japan prior to the nuclear drops,
Right.
History emphatically shows that massive aerial campaigns against decentralized adversaries harden their resolve. It does not force them to simply surrender.
Right. And the technological surprise is just as jarring as the geographical reality. I mean, according to the analysis by Stanislav Krupivnik, the strategic shock cannot be overstated here.
Oh, the speed of these things.
Yeah, he highlights how the Western defense establishment was caught completely off guard by the sheer speed, maneuverability, and efficacy of the hypersonic and conventional capabilities displayed in these strikes. The missiles didn't just pierce the shield, their terminal velocity shattered the foundational assumption that Western radar arrays could reliably track and intercept them.
And if the shield is broken locally, the immediate geopolitical reaction seems to be expanding the war globally.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the most confusing, terrifying data point of the last 48 hours, the Diego Garcia enigma.
Yeah, this is wild for the listener who hasn't stared at a naval map recently. Diego Garcia is a highly classified, heavily fortified joint U.S. and U.K. military base. It's located in the absolute middle of the Indian Ocean. It is roughly 4,000 kilometers away from Iranian territory.
Right.
And there was a reported missile strike on it.
That distance, 4,000 kilometers, that is the crux of the entire geopolitical escalation.
Exactly. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu immediately capitalized on this massive distance. He is aggressively using the Diego Garcia strike to claim that Iran has definitively fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM.
Which changes everything.
His argument to hesitant European leaders is explicit and terrifying.
Yeah.
He's saying if they have the propulsion technology to hit a tiny atoll 4,000 kilometers away in the Indian Ocean, they have the capability to hit Rome. They can hit Paris. And they can hit Berlin.
He is framing this not as a regional Middle Eastern conflict, but as an immediate existential threat to the entirety of the European continent.
Right.
Which is a profound, calculated escalation in the global narrative, and it's happening amidst massive regional chaos that is actively choking the global economy. I mean, according to the analysis by Ted Cruz, the collateral damage to the global energy grid is already happening, and it is devastating.
Oh, the gas fields.
Yes, he highlighted that a massive natural gas field in Qatar was recently bombed in the crossfire, which effectively shut down 15% of the world's natural gas supply overnight.
Overnight.
Cruz also noted a fascinating geopolitical shift that contradicts the Washington narrative. Arab nations appear to be far more united behind this current military conflict than Europe is. The regional powers are mobilizing, while European capitals are just paralyzed by indecision. And to add fuel to the fire, the Wall Street Journal published a report verifying that missiles were actually fired from within the sovereign territories of Qatar and Bahrain.
So the entire region is essentially a multi-front crossfire, and munitions are flying from supposedly allied territories. But let's circle back to Diego Garcia, because this is where the narrative completely fractures for me.
Yeah.
Iran has essentially taken credit for every single strike they have launched so far. They hit the Negev, they take credit, they hit energy infrastructure, they broadcast it on state television. But they are vehemently, categorically denying that they fired the missile at Diego Garcia.
This raises an incredibly important question about the fog of war, narrative control, and honestly, the physics of ballistic missiles. According to the analysis by Wally Rashid, the inconsistencies here are glaring. Iran's established behavioral pattern in this conflict is to loudly claim responsibility in order to build deterrence.
Right, they want people to know.
Exactly. Denying a strike of this magnitude breaks their strategic pattern entirely. Furthermore, Rashid points out a massive crack in the Western alliance's messaging. The NATO Secretary General, in a direct interview with CBS, explicitly stated that NATO cannot confirm the Israeli assessment that the weapon was an Iranian ICBM.
Wow.
The top security official for the entire Western military alliance is publicly refusing to co-sign the narrative that Europe is under an ICBM threat.
Which opens the door to some incredibly dark, uncomfortable theories. Rashid introduced the theory that the Diego Garcia strike might actually be a false flag operation. The logic being that an attack on a remote US-UK base, intentionally misattributed to an Iranian ICBM, is the exact catalyst needed to terrify hesitant, well-funded European nations into forming a broader global military coalition.
It's a heavy accusation.
It is. And look at the risk matrix here. Why would Israel or any allied intelligence agency risk orchestrating a false flag operation, or even just purposefully lying about radar data when they already have the full, unprecedented backing of the United States military? That seems like an astronomical risk for a marginal gain.
Well, if we look at the raw industrial logistics of modern warfare, the motivation becomes dangerously clear. It comes down to sheer manufacturing desperation.
What do you mean?
The United States military, despite its multi-trillion-dollar budget, currently lacks the industrial capacity and the physical munitions stockpile required to wage a sustained multi-front war against a deeply entrenched, decentralized enemy across a landmass the size of the Middle East.
Wait, really?
Yes. We simply do not have the factory floors, the raw materials, or the labor force to churn out complex interceptors and long-range weapons at the rate this high-intensity conflict is consuming them. The United States is running out of bullets, to put it bluntly.
Wow.
So Israel desperately needs NATO forces, the British, French, and German navies, their air forces, and their untouched stockpiles to physically enter the fray because American manufacturing alone cannot sustain the attrition rate. A false flag, or aggressively misattributing a real strike to force the ICBM narrative, is a calculated gamble to force Europe off the sidelines and into a total war economy.
That is a chilling assessment of our industrial vulnerability.
Yeah.
And speaking of vulnerabilities, let's look at the actual checkbook paying for all of this, because the economic obliteration is happening right now.
Oh, it's brutal.
The hard economic data coming in on day 23 of this war is nothing short of catastrophic. The United States national debt just officially crossed the $39 trillion threshold.
Unbelievable.
And in the very week that milestone was breached, the Pentagon is sending an urgent request to Capitol Hill for a staggering $200 billion simply to fund the ongoing immediate war effort.
And that $200 billion is just the baseline taxpayer expenditure for the military logistics. The real visceral cost of this war is being felt by you, the listener, right now at the grocery store and the gas pump.
Exactly. The global commodities markets are in absolute chaos. Fertilizer costs, the fundamental bedrock of global agriculture, are up 25% across the board.
Which is terrifying.
If fertilizer goes up, every single piece of food you buy goes up next month. Gas and diesel have spiked over 30%, crippling domestic shipping. Jet fuel has surged by an unbelievable 50%. The global supply chain is buckling under the pressure of the Strait of Hormuz threat.
It's a domino effect.
And according to the analysis by Scott Patton, the U.S. Treasury has had to take drastic, almost unbelievable undercover measures to prevent a total market collapse. Yes. They have quietly unsanctioned Russian oil, intentionally allowing the release of 130 million barrels that are currently on the water, simply to try and mitigate the massive supply shock caused by this Middle Eastern conflict.
Think about the profound geopolitical irony there. To fight one heavily sanctioned adversary in the Middle East, the United States Treasury is forced to secretly lift sanctions on another major global adversary, Russia, just to keep the global economy from flatlining.
It's wild.
But the economic threat goes much, much deeper than oil prices. According to the analysis by Professor Mohammad Marandi, Iran has articulated a very clear, scientifically devastating scorched earth counter-threat.
Right, if the ultimatum runs out.
Exactly. If the 7:44 p.m. ultimatum expires and their power plants are struck, Iran pledges to permanently destroy all regional energy assets. But crucially, they have explicitly targeted the vital desalination plants located in the allied Arab nations that are currently hosting U.S. military bases.
Desalination plants. So we aren't just talking about cutting off the crude oil supply. We are talking about literally cutting off the drinking water for entire civilian populations in the desert.
Exactly. The mechanism of reverse osmosis desalination is incredibly delicate. If you destroy the intake valves and the high-pressure filtration systems of these massive plants in places like the UAE or Bahrain, you cannot rebuild them in a week.
No.
You can survive a massive economic depression. A human being cannot survive 3 days without water in the desert. It is the ultimate asymmetric threat. Now, contrast that terrifying reality with the wildly optimistic rhetoric echoing out of Washington.
Right.
You have figures like former Congressman Jason Chaffetz going on national television and claiming that at the 49th hour right after the ultimatum expires and American strikes occur, oil will magically flow freely again and global prices will plummet to $60 a barrel.
It seems like a massive, almost delusional disconnect from reality. But let me press you on the logic of maximum pressure. From a historical strategic perspective, doesn't extreme economic and military pressure, like explicitly threatening to systematically dismantle a nation's power grid, usually force a rational regime to the negotiating table? Isn't the whole point of an ultimatum to break their political will before the bombs drop?
That is a classic textbook assumption taught in war colleges, but it fatally misreads the psychology of a nuclear threshold state. I have to sharply disagree with that premise.
Okay, why?
Because when you corner a heavily armed, highly ideological nation of 93 million people and threaten to eliminate their fundamental means of survival, their electricity, their economy, their infrastructure, you do not induce submission. You guarantee maximum escalation.
Because they have no way out.
Exactly. When a regime fundamentally believes its very existence is ending, they have absolutely nothing left to lose. They will throw every piece of ordnance they possess at the global economy, at the desalination plants, at the shipping lanes. The ultimatum doesn't build a diplomatic off-ramp, it burns the bridge and forces everyone into the abyss.
Okay, so if human diplomacy is failing and the bridge is burned, who is actually making the targeting decisions here? Because the way the United States is fighting this war institutionally is totally unprecedented.
Oh, completely.
According to the analysis by David Rothkopf, the current administration's DOGE initiative, the Department of Government Efficiency, deliberately eliminated crucial layers of State Department experts. These were the exact career diplomats and analysts who assess global oil markets and geopolitical blowback, and they were purged just days before this war kicked off. And furthermore, he noted that Kash Patel effectively purged the Iranian counterintelligence experts at the FBI.
So we have systematically blinded our own intelligence apparatus and induced a massive brain drain right at the precipice of a global conflict.
Right.
We've removed the institutional memory and the human expertise required to understand the adversary's culture, their red lines, and their internal politics.
And what fills that massive intelligence void?
Code.
Automated networks. Right. According to the analysis by Ron Chapman, in the total absence of human experts, the United States military is leaning heavily on advanced machine learning and algorithmic processing to run the war. He specifically detailed how the military is utilizing Palantir's Maven Smart system alongside advanced Claude language models, all integrated through massive Amazon data centers, to actually ingest surveillance data, select, and process military targets in Iran.
It's deeply concerning.
It's like attaching a high-frequency stock trading bot to a nuclear missile silo. It calculates the math flawlessly in milliseconds, but it has absolutely zero understanding of the geopolitical crash it's causing.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. We are witnessing the privatization of wartime decision-making. When you hand over targeting logistics to private tech corporations and automated intelligence networks, you effectively create a new invisible arms race.
Yeah.
But it's not an arms race between nation-states. It's an arms race between private algorithms operating alongside or even above the constitutional authority of sovereign governments.
But wait, let's look at the flip side of that. Humans are inherently flawed.
Sure.
Human analysts get tired, they act on emotion, they misread grainy satellite data in a panic. Why are we assuming a human in a bunker is safer than a machine? Isn't it highly probable that algorithmic targeting, processing millions of sensor data points a second, is actually safer, vastly more precise, and less prone to disastrous human error?
That assumes the only goal of warfare is precision striking, putting a bomb through a specific window. War is not just about hitting a target accurately. It is fundamentally about understanding the strategic, historical, and diplomatic consequences of hitting that target.
Okay, fair point.
Algorithms are incredibly efficient at identifying a thermal heat signature of a missile battery, but they possess zero strategic foresight and absolutely no diplomatic nuance. An algorithm doesn't understand cultural blowback.
Right, it doesn't know history.
It doesn't understand the historical context of striking a specific religious or geographic region. Relying on massive data models to fight a war leads to disastrous miscalculations because the machine lacks the inherently human capacity for restraint and context.
Wow.
And this lack of nuanced understanding brings us to the original underlying justification for this entire conflict. According to the analysis by Alan Ayer, we need to completely deconstruct the narrative of the imminent nuclear threat.
The 60% enrichment.
Yes. Ayer explains the mechanics of uranium enrichment. Yes, Iran did enrich uranium to 60%. But this was fundamentally a signaling tactic, a geopolitical negotiating lever pulled loudly after the JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal, was scrapped.
Right.
He makes a crucial technical distinction that the algorithms ignore. Enriching to 60% is not the same as having a viable nuclear bomb. Weaponization requires months of delicate, highly complex engineering to build a detonator, to miniaturize the warhead, and to mate it to a delivery system. The intelligence community, stripped of its human experts, cannot actually confirm that an imminent nuclear threat exists.
So we went to war against a theoretical capability, not an imminent reality.
Exactly.
So wait, if 60% enrichment is just a geopolitical megaphone, and we don't have the human intelligence left to verify the existence of an actual engineered warhead, we are letting an algorithmic targeting system process strikes based on a diplomatic bluff. That is staggering.
Yeah, it really is.
How is this reality playing back home? Because the fallout in Washington and across the country is seismic. Let's look at a hyperlocal political example that speaks volumes about the mood of the country.
Okay.
In Georgia's 14th congressional district, which is famously ruby red, deep, Maggi country, a moderate Democrat named Sean Harris is currently leading the Trump-endorsed Republican Clayton Fuller by 3 points in a runoff election.
Wow.
What makes this mathematically insane is that Harris previously lost this exact district by a massive 29-point margin. He has closed a 29-point gap in deep red territory in a matter of weeks.
That is a statistical anomaly that demands a deep explanation. And the explanation is entirely economic. It's the 30% spike in diesel we talked about earlier.
Okay.
According to the analysis by Tara Palmieri, everyday voters are suffocating under the massive economic weight of this conflict. It's hitting rural, agricultural communities the hardest because fertilizer and fuel are their lifeblood. The political realignments happening in real time are staggering.
It's turning everything upside down.
You even have Marjorie Taylor Greene going on national television to aggressively attack President Trump, calling this a war of choice, and heavily criticizing his handling of the impending release of the Epstein files.
And the institutional decay of the government itself is accelerating right alongside these political shifts.
Absolutely.
According to the analysis by Brian Tyler Cohen, the domestic infrastructure is literally fraying at the edges. Because of massive Department of Homeland Security funding issues tied up in the war effort, TSA agents are calling out of work en masse. crippling domestic travel and supply chains.
Just grinding things to a halt.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the political warfare is reaching a fever pitch. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is publicly discussing bringing inherent contempt charges against James Comer, alleging a massive, coordinated cover-up of severe White House corruption.
If we connect all these domestic dots, the TSA failures, the flip districts, the internal party infighting, the picture is glaringly clear. The administration is trapped in a multi-front crisis of its own making.
Yeah.
The rural communities, which make up their core base, are actively turning against a war they perceive as a devastatingly costly distraction from their kitchen table realities.
You just want to afford groceries.
Exactly. And simultaneously, there is a looming threat of massive congressional investigations into alleged corruption at DHS under Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski, not to mention the highly controversial destruction of the Health and Human Services vaccine distribution system.
And culturally, the domestic response to this institutional collapse is fascinating. People are voting with their feet. There's a massive, bizarre migration of citizens flocking to Texas. Despite the state's highly controversial leadership and policies, it seems people are on a desperate search for some semblance of state-level stability or independence from the federal chaos.
They're looking for an anchor.
So I have to ask the cynical political question here. Is this entire aggressive foreign policy in the Middle East, the 48-hour ultimatums, the algorithmic strikes, the ICBM narratives, just a classic wag the dog scenario?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a manufactured high-stakes distraction designed to pull the public's eyes away from domestic scandals, like the impending release of 3 million new documents related to the Epstein files?
It has all the historical hallmarks of a wag-the-dog strategy, absolutely. When domestic scandals reach a boiling point and institutional trust collapses, launching a foreign conflict is the oldest trick in the political playbook to rally the populace around the flag.
Right, look over here, not over there.
But here is the critical difference in 2026. The strategy is catastrophically backfiring. A distraction only works if the public feels economically secure at home while watching the war on TV. Because this war has immediately caused diesel, food, and fertilizer prices to explode, it is actively driving away the exact independent and rural voters the administration desperately needs. They are bearing the immediate, painful economic brunt of the distraction, which makes them resent the administration even more. You cannot distract a voter from a scandal when they can't afford to buy groceries.
Which brings us perfectly to the final piece of this puzzle, the information war and the resulting cultural dysphoria. How is the narrative of this war actually being fought on the airwaves? And why is the public rejecting it?
It's a huge shift.
According to the analysis by Abby Martin, the mainstream legacy media is functioning entirely as a lapdog for the war effort, much like they did in 2003. She points out that they are actively infantilizing the public by asking questions that are completely devoid of historical mechanism or context.
Just surface level.
For example, she noted anchors asking Iranian officials, "Why are you attacking your Muslim neighbors?" without providing any acknowledgement of the prior provocations, the covert assassinations, or the deeply complex geopolitical history of the region. It's presented as unprovoked, cartoonish villainy rather than a complex tit-for-tat geopolitical escalation.
And the legacy media executives are realizing that the public isn't buying this sanitized narrative anymore, which is leading to some incredibly desperate performative behavior on camera.
Performative is the perfect word.
You have CNN's Jake Tapper suddenly abandoning his polished, multi-million-dollar studio set to broadcast from his cluttered office desk. You have Anderson Cooper utilizing large podcast-style prop microphones on his desk.
It's so weird.
They are explicitly attempting to cosplay as independent, raw broadcasters to win back the authenticity and trust they've hemorrhaged over the last decade.
But the public sees right through the aesthetic changes. According to the analysis by Ash Sarkar, this rejection of legacy media ties into a much broader, deeply rooted cultural moment. She argues that legacy institutions and centrist politics have fundamentally failed to address the grim post-2008 economic reality that has hollowed out the working class.
It's been a long time coming.
This decades-long economic stagnation has deeply contributed to what she calls a crisis of male purpose. Sarkar points out a fascinating dichotomy in how this crisis is being manipulated. While the political right wing has managed to dominate institutional and algorithmic power structures, the political left has relied heavily on identity politics and horizontal, decentralized organizational structures.
Which leaves a gap.
Exactly. This dynamic has left a massive, gaping vacuum of trust across the entire working class who feel abandoned by both sides.
And that massive vacuum of trust is exactly what independent media is filling right now. According to the analysis by Sabi Sabs, independent media is currently winning the information war because it provides the vital historical and geopolitical context that legacy networks intentionally, willfully omit.
People want the details.
The public is desperate for the why and the how, not just a sanitized list of what happened. And because the weight of the world feels so incredibly heavy right now, we are seeing bizarre cultural touchstones emerge as coping mechanisms.
Oh, yeah, the Afro Man thing.
Yes. Sabs highlighted the unexpected, massive resurgence of the rapper Afro Man in the cultural zeitgeist as a form of absurd escapism. At the same exact time, we saw the tech company OpenAI completely shut down its highly anticipated algorithmic video generator, Sora, directly due to overwhelming public distrust and intense backlash against synthetic, computer-generated content.
The public is desperately craving unvarnished reality, and they are aggressively rejecting anything that feels manufactured, whether it's a deepfake video or a sanitized CNN broadcast. But hold on, let me push back on the romantic idea that independent media has totally won the war for truth. Legacy media still controls massive billion-dollar corporate budgets.
That's true.
They have unparalleled direct access to the halls of power, the Pentagon briefing rooms, and the Oval Office. They have the institutional reach to shape the ultimate historical record. Long after the independent audio streams end, aren't the history books still written by the institutions with the biggest printing presses?
Historically, yes. The victor with the printing press wrote the history. But we are in the middle of a massive paradigm shift. Authenticity is the new primary currency of the information age. $1 billion broadcasting budget means absolutely nothing if the audience fundamentally believes you are lying to them. The public is actively, aggressively rejecting the polished, teleprompter-read broadcasts in favor of raw, unvarnished reporting. When the economic pain of a war hits your wallet when you can't afford diesel to run your farm, you don't want a perfectly lit anchor in $1 million studio telling you everything is fine. You want an independent analyst showing you the actual receipts and the unredacted data.
Right.
The legacy institutions may have the budgets and the access, but they have permanently lost the mandate of the people.
If you remember one thing this week, let it be this. This conflict has breached the boundaries of a localized war. With algorithmic targeting replacing human diplomacy and global energy markets held hostage to a 48-hour countdown, we have crossed an economic and geopolitical point of no return.
Consider this. When the dust settles and the populations of these allied nations realize they were dragged into a multi-trillion-dollar economic depression based on intelligence voids and algorithmic calculations, what happens to the very fabric of our democratic institutions? How do you govern a populace that no longer believes a single word you say?
If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again, goodbye.